We settled that. Is everyone cool with starting with Dhyan? Generally, if it is a 2-hour program, all other programs tend to be 2-hour programs. We do 10 minutes of meditation in the beginning, 10 minutes of a recap sort of meditation in the end, roughly. We also save like good 15-20 minutes towards the end, if it is a 2-hour program, for interaction, where we share with each other a couple of questions I ask, same questions I ask. What did you pick up from today's session, like today's reflection for yourself? What was your personal takeaway from this, from the Bhagavad Gita? And how will you use it in your personal life, not in general terms? If you don't want to regurgitate, well, Lord said this, or Krishna said that, or this, that, we can all read it. What good is it for you in your traffic, with your boss, with your employees, with your business, with your husband, with your neighbors, with your teenage kids, with your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, right? What's the use of any of this? Because otherwise we're wasting our time and we should drop off and not engage in it. And I ask this question purposely because I am very confident that it's very directly applicable. It's so pointedly, so directly, so sort of readily applicable. And so I'd invite at the end of each session, the last sort of 20 minutes, that please share. Because there's been a lot of feedback that's when a lot of people pick up a lot of good stuff, that, oh yeah, I can think of it that way. If someone has missed something, then it sort of revises it, it refreshes it, brings it forward for your memory also. So I highly encourage, it's not required, it's an opt-in. If you don't feel like talking that day, you don't have to. If you just want to listen in, that's fine. The other rule we have in Gita Yoga is that there are no rules, meaning you can join whenever you want from the 2 to 4 window. You can leave whenever you want. You can join, leave, and then join again if you want. You can keep your video on, off, any of it. Right? The only sort of only preference is not disrupting each other, like inadvertently not keeping the device unmuted while you also watch something else or doing the dishes or what have you. Most people are aware of that. So other than that, I mean, the best way to show up would be to be you. The best way to show up and benefit from the Bhagavad Gita really would be to be you with all the vulnerabilities, like Arjun was, right? All the vulnerabilities, all the mess, the hot mess in the head and around in the room, as is. Essentially, the glory of the Gita is that it has no expectations, no prerequisites. It does not need you to know Sanskrit or know English grammar or have this kind of a degree or be a Hindu or be born in India or anything like that. It comes to us wherever you are at. Like a mother to a child crying, right? Like a year-old to your toddler crying. The mother doesn't expect that I'm sitting on the sofa with my remote and a 1-year-old child hungry. Well, if you want milk, you'll figure out a way to come to me and then I'll feed you. No. The mother drops what it is she's doing and runs to the child. So is the Gita. And all the mess that we're in and we've created, without a doubt, it'll come to us. And therefore, there really isn't any other expectation except a broad, open mind. I say to my kids, they're both in college, one is in grad school, the other is an undergraduate, that an open mind is the most beautiful thing. It's the most beautiful possession. If you can keep an open mind, Gita is going to come to you and it will start doing its work. It will revolutionize the way we think. It will stabilize the sort of chaotic life that we find ourselves in. It's the promise of the Gita. It's the promise of the Lord. It does have. It'll be a lot easier if you have a little bit of faith, some trust. All of which means just an open mind that maybe I'll give it a shot. I'll try it. Maybe it will make sense. Maybe it won't. If it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There will be no offense. I want to assure you, there is no judgment. This is a very, very judgment-free zone. To each his own, to each her own. Every one of us is on our journey of lifetimes, and we're here for a reason. And there's an exact and a perfect reason why we are where we are, doing what we're doing. So the Gita does not tamper with it. It only enhances it. while leaving us where we are, doing what we're doing, never goading us to run away from it or stop it. It only makes us better at whatever it is that we're doing. And therefore, we also don't want to have any artificial rules about that. At the end of the day, it will be a win if everybody feels the purity of love out of this, the purity of love within themselves and the ability to share that with others. If that is felt, then the Gita has done its job, is doing its job. And that's the intention with which we will start this. Generally, what tends to happen is like about an hour and 5 minutes of, I call it reflection, because it's like a mirror. Gita is like the mirror. It'll show us the truth as is. We have to decide what we want to do about it. It will not force us. It will not compel us. You don't have to say any mantras. You don't have to do any rituals. You don't have to do any fasting. You don't have to wake up at any particular time, sleep at any particular time. You don't have to do pranayama, nothing that you don't want to do. It will automatically start guiding us toward a better choice in life, better and better choices in life. It'll automatically inspire us, right? Like we'll start thinking about it and feel committed. And so the reflection, like the mirror showing it as is, the cleaner the mirror is, the clearer the reflection, and we're able to see things as they are. So it'll be my commitment and my effort to really not tamper with the words of the Gita, but share with you as I see it, as I feel it, as I've experienced it, so that you can do your own interpretation. I'd highly encourage you to do your own interpretation, to do your own contemplation, to do your own inquiry. It will mean nothing, no matter how big a guru is, no big how a saint and Mahatma sages are. All we do is listen to them without internal processing. It doesn't stick and it means nothing and it doesn't have the effect. So the bigger deal is in your processing. Every 2 weeks, I'll just reignite it, or I'll just polish it up for you. I'll just remind you, I'll just goad you. But the real magic will happen within you. You will be that magician. You will create that magic. And the magic is the transformation of life. That the external circumstances will not change. You will still have the same job and the same jerk boss maybe, or same really sort of unproductive employees, or same nagging teenager, or whatever challenges, problems. There's nothing in the Gita that promises that your external circumstances will change. The way you'll process that internally, the way you'll receive it, your filters will have changed, the way they appear to us then. The experience within will be a very different view, a very different understanding of it, much richer, much deeper, much insightful, much more empathetic, a very pointed understanding, very clear, much more clarity of what is happening, why this is happening. And therefore, the way we will respond to it will be very different also. We will stop reacting in life, and we will begin responding. If you think back, much of our life goes in reacting rather than responding. And that desire, that impulse to react to something that someone just said or did, will start to slowly recede. And in return, we'll respond in kind. We will only do in the right measure whatever needs to be done for whatever was shared with us. So all of those, again, this is from experience. I've been studying the Gita, I think, for about 16, 17 years now, steadily increasing in my love for it. I feel like my comprehension of it, I think it's endless. I don't know that anyone can claim that they figured it, they've understood it. In fact, the scriptures themselves say that only the speaker of the Gita truly knows it fully as is. And this speaker was the Lord himself, right? The Gita, Sri Krishna. But every step taken towards it enriches us that much. So that's one. Let me see if there's anything else on my list. So again, the Gita, sometimes I give this example, that if someone had 1,000 acres of land and they've just planted roses exotic roses of all kinds, really fragrant roses, not the kind that we get in America. Actually, fragrant roses, filled with it. And then they picked all the petals from all the roses, and then they crushed and they put through some sort of a factory, and they created maybe a big bottle full of rose water or whatever. And then they further took it to a distillery and distilled that even, and brought a small bottle of like really concentrated rose perfume. 1,000 acres of roses is filled in it, in that intense, pure, nothing but rose perfume. So is the Gita. Sometimes I feel like tens of thousands, literally, of verses of 2 to 4 lines each, which means 20s, 30s, 40s of thousands of verses. And this is just to say there's really countless. As we continue through these Gita reflections, we'll visit some of those places, some of the Puranas, some of the historical evidences, some of the other scriptures, Upanishad, what's said in the Vedas. In time, we will be visiting some of those as well. But all of that as if the 1,000 acres of roses have been brought into the Upanishad like this big bottle. And Gita is the distillate of even that. Everything in the Gita can be traced back to the Upanishads, which are the Hindu original scriptures, or the Sanatan Dharma's original scriptures. Not even Hindu, really. Hindu is a word that appears nowhere in the Gita. And most of our scriptures, very rarely some of the modern scriptures, but not, it was recent times. It's really Sanatan Dharma that we belong to, which means ever relevant, ever fresh, ever in fashion, ever suitable, and never irrelevant. Right? Sanatan Dharma it doesn't matter what time and age, and which planet, and which galaxy, which body, a man or a woman, or the color of the skin, or the nationality, or whether you eat meat or not, or whether you're Brahmin or what have you. All that is irrelevant. This is ever relevant. However you slice and dice, anything that exists, that is how broad the knowledge is. That is how magnanimous, that is how inclusive. When I start talking about the inclusivity of the Gita, I'm so humbled. I can either talk endlessly about it, or I have to shut up and just bow down to its inclusivity. It is so inclusive that it literally leaves nothing and no one behind in its scale and scope. And yet it is just 700 verses packed, because it is Sanatan, because there is nothing that exists that this does not apply to. It doesn't matter whichever time was. It's as applicable to the old as it is to the young, and to those who believe and to those who don't. And it is as relevant to the atheists. Go figure that. As it is the most ardent devotees. Because these are the basic laws. This is how the world is created. This is the primary design. This is the fundamental design of all of creation. In it, there is a place for atheists and believers. In creation, we find atheists and believers, and therefore the laws that generated this creation also have a place for that. And everybody has an equal place. Everybody has a place of honor. Everybody has a place to be themselves. And so, as we go through this, there'll be some weird mantras that I'll say, like really strange aphorisms that I'll call those mantras, but it is only out of fun that I say. One of those will be that expect nothing, accept everything cheerfully. That's one of the mantras that we find in the Gita. We do what we do. Bindas first class is one such mantra. First class bindas. The Gita will teach us the trick of how to do whatever we do, whenever we do, with whomever we do, how to do it always first class. Not second class and never third class, always first class, top notch. And then the next moment we become bindas, which is like a Indian term, which means fearless, carefree. Right? Bindas would be carefree. unencumbered. So the other one, as I said, was expect nothing. The Gita will teach us how to, while performing our best, how not to expect anything. And how and why, what sense does it make to accept everything? Expect nothing, accept everything. But the big deal is this, cheerfully, right? Because a stone sitting in your backyard expects nothing. And it does accept everything. That neighbor's dog, sometimes you don't see what it does on that rock. And that doesn't make that stone a yogi. It expects nothing and accepts everything. It is not able to be cheerful, which is the most beautiful sign of life. Right? And so expecting nothing, accept everything cheerfully is what we will also learn. And there are other sort of, like I said, weird mantras like that we'll randomly, occasionally bring up. So another question I have, a couple of questions I have for you is, when we talk about the context of the Gita, as I just said, there's just too much to talk about, and therefore got to bring some sanity, some method to this madness. Some of you know, and I get like too excited, worse than a child in a candy shop when the topic of the Gita comes up. Feel free to reel me back in, unmute yourself and say, okay, well, stop, slow down, do what you have to do. This is your session, I'm your servant. My job only is to serve you all as best as I can, but only to the extent that you want, only in the way that you like, not imposing my ways on it. And so please let me remind you again that you're in control here. This is your forum. You rule. You really do. You will experience that. You'll see that as we have more and more sessions. The Gita has a significance. Like there are in the Puranas, there's a lot of sages and like avatars have talked about why the Gita, what the Gita. So there are references to those that I'm aware of, that I have access to. Let's put it that way. In some of our sessions, I sometimes bring those out. We will be able to make a choice whether it's relevant here, or do you care, or you want to just skip that and just go straight to the Gita, or do you want some sort of a combination of that on occasion? So that's a question that I'm asking you. And the other would be, in the Gita, which has 18 chapters and 700 verses, frequently it's a Q&A. Essentially, the entire scripture is a Q&A of life, right? So the two people call each other by different names. Sometimes brother, sometimes friend, sometimes Krishna, sometimes charioteer, sometimes Arjun, sometimes this, that. Different names have different connotations, different meanings. Each of our names have lovely meanings, beautiful meanings. And so do the names of the Lord, so do the names of Arjun. What we could also do is visit some of the names. In each session we could take like 3 or 4 names and like, what does it mean? Anantarup or Achyut or Keshav. I've heard Keshav. I've heard Madhav. I've heard Krishna. What does it mean? Is it just like maybe dark or black or what? What does it mean? To the extent that you're interested, we could visit those, and then you'll see that, wow, these are pretty loaded definitions, pretty loaded names. It's massive. It's very revealing, eye-opening meanings to those. And all of that will start to point you to that this is really a perfect scripture, because there's not one word wasted because he had to pack the knowledge of the world about life into just this small. He had a couple of hours. I'll get to the context of the Gita. Very, very thrilling context of the Gita, like how it was born. Some of which I said during the early dhyan that we just did, right, before this. So I would be curious if you care, if you want to know the meaning of the names of the meaning of the names of the characters in this. And then another way so 2 ways to do this. We can go verse by verse by verse, like chapter by chapter by chapter, and verse by verse by verse, as we're doing in many other sessions. Or I can just pick some luminous verses. Hey guys, I think in the first chapter, these 7 verses are particularly poignant. They're particularly significant. They kind of bring the theme out. So let's do those and then move to chapter 2. And let's do the 32 sum out of the 72 in chapter 2, and let's move to chapter 3, which is Karma Yoga, the famed Karma Yoga. That's another way, right? Like just picking out some themes. Or we literally go verse by verse by verse. So my questions to you are these. Feel free to unmute yourself and share. And any of these questions, like what's your preference, verse by verse, or pick some important ones? There have to be all important ones. Go ahead.
I would say don't go verse by verse, especially if we're only doing every other week in 2 hours. It's going to take a long time. Maybe summarize the chapters and pick the ones that, are important.
Yeah, makes sense.
So we have some sense of what it is all about a little sooner than, 2-3 years from now. We'll all know what the BhagwadGita is about.
If we're alive. But I can.
That's my thoughts.
Thank you for sharing that, Bhaiya. I totally get it. Any counter to that? Anyone would rather just any pushback on that?
No counter. I just wanted to second that. I like that idea of theme-wise. Just because, it's more about what flows between all of us. What just resonates for all of us, and kind of organically go with that.
Okay, great. Like they would say in a board meeting, someone seconded, done, right? Sold. So we will. I'll pick a few verses from each of the. I should also caution you though that some of the chapters out of these 18 will have just really a handful, like on the fingers of two hands, maybe. So I think, like the first chapter, for example, I don't think it'll have more than 10 verses that I would pick. It'll definitely have less than 10 verses in the entire first chapter that I would pick as really significant. On the other hand, a chapter like the second chapter by virtue, it has 72 verses, and it's also very emphatic, it has a lot of gravity. And so I would not want to skimp on it, and I wouldn't want to shortchange you and give you the wrong impression that that's all in it. So I might take the liberty to pick out as many verses as I think. 12th chapter is the shortest chapter, for example. It has only 15 verses, I believe. But, 13 of the 15, I don't know how to pick from any of those. Like, those are like really, I'd have to pick 12 out of the 15, something like that. So we'll have some of those experiences as well. But to you all's point, then I think it makes sense to manage it.
I think maybe in the beginning when you're starting a new chapter, maybe a summary or an overview, kind of like a professor would do, like this is what's going to be covered in this chapter, just so we have some sense of, then we can break it down later. Like, okay, I think you do that in the ones you do in our meditation group, kind of summarize what that chapter is all about. Kind of like the same thing.
I agree. And I might do a little bit more of that here, and maybe a little nuanced, because in that we do verse by verse by verse. Here, if we're going to jump from place to place, it'll become really important to have that common, sort of be anchored in the theme of that chapter, right? Be grounded in what is this about. So yes, well received, and I'll keep that in mind. We'll definitely do that. Any other suggestions from anyone else? Anything that you're curious about, any particular interest you're hoping to get? Avoid this because we're co-creating it. This is your forum. Don't hesitate to lend it your voice and put your fingerprints on it. So, I think, anyone? If not, I think we'll start somewhere.
Jai Shri Krishna, Jitubai.
Jai Shri Krishna, Purvi-ban.
Sorry, I just joined a little bit later.
First rule, no sorry. No need for it.
I just wanted to share that maybe once in 3 months or something, if we can have one session dedicated to just discussion as to what all, or
I
any
love
kind
it.
of question or any kind of debate that we wanted to have. I'm sure we all will have the, question and answers, and we can debate and kind of learn. And you are obviously there to steer us into the right direction. I guess that would really help us kind of strengthen our views and understand and kind of clear our queries and maybe misunderstandings.
I love it. I love it. We should totally do that. And I mean, those who want to participate can join. Those who would rather not, then they don't have to, obviously. But I like it. I like it so much so that I'm wondering if we should even consider it. Maybe we can try it like after every chapter, right? Like pause, at least keep half a session after the following session after the end of the chapter to do that. Let's experiment with it. At a minimum, do what you're suggesting, like every quarter, once every 3 months, take like the entire session just to process and share back.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Always being open.
Oh, please. Yeah, this is it's not my position to be anything other than being open. So as much as I talk about the Gita being the most open-minded scripture, it would be the first thing I'd have to demonstrate, exemplify also. Great. So then maybe I'll set at least some context for the Gita. Again, I did a little bit of that during the first dhyan. But most of you all know, I think, a lot of this, but I think it just makes sense to set the context for those those of you who may not, or just to brush up and get there. This is a lot of. I mean, you'll have to have some faith in it. There is a lot of evidence. There is a lot of emphasis put on this that this was real, right? This BhagwadGita was about a 2 hour and 15-minute long conversation, somewhere between 2 and 2.5 hours. Somewhere where, depending on the speed of which they spoke to each other, Krishna and Arjun, mostly. It was that conversation that happened. The time is roughly starting at 7:45, so about 7:45 in the morning to about 10 o'clock in the morning at a place called Kurukshetra, which is in the northwestern part of India. And this is on the brink of a war. In the morning before the war was supposed to begin at 8 o'clock in the morning on that day. It was a world war of sorts for them, at least it was. It was definitely a civil war, a national scale war at the time. And that's when the conversation began. It has some fantastic elements to it, like television, like somebody seeing it from a distance and narrating that. It also has a very, very tangible quality to it. It's like some very perceptive, very direct questions asked, and a lot of pushback. Nothing is taken for granted in this scripture. Arjun, the receiver, is not automatically accepting it, whatever is being told to him. He's questioning it, he's asking, he's even, at times he says, "Are you confused? You're confusing me." All that. So it's at a peer level is what I'm trying to say. It's like a peer-to-peer type of conversation. This is not a guru-disciple, although you will see that Arjun in the first chapter itself accepts Krishna momentarily for that time period, that you're my guru, he says. That you're my guide. It's more in that sense, like guide me, Krishna. But very quickly then he gets back in the mode of, oh, we're friends, aren't we? Now we've hung out together, haven't we? We've sat together, we've eaten together, we've joked together, all that. And so he exercises that right. Arjun, the receiver, exercises his sort of compatibility, his peer level with the giver, the Lord himself. And that's really beautiful, because there's no heavy-handed sermon like handed down that thou shalt, right? No one's on the mountaintop, no one's saying thou shalt. And in fact, so often Krishna says, I think. I mean, it's that open-minded. He says, it's my opinion. He literally uses this word. Yukta tame mataha. Mata is opinion. In my opinion, Arjun, I think, in my opinion, you should consider this. He even says in the end that, well, do whatever you want. Do as you wish. Yatechasi tatha kuru is the Sanskrit term. In the 18th chapter, he says, I've shared with you. I've answered every question that you asked. I've given you more detail than ordinarily available, accessible. But that at the end of the day, you will do what you want to do, and so be it. Yatha ichha asi, as is your wish, tatha kuru, so you should do. He, in the middle of it, he says, with you or without you. Nimitte matra bhava savyasacham. Nimit is just sort of some reason, some random reason. Like if you're there, we'll win this. This side will win, the right side, the righteous side. Dharma will win with you or without you. You happen to be on this side, and therefore you should fight. Because the world will then see an exemplar that those who stick it out on the side of the right ultimately prevail, because that side will prevail. He says, that's how it always will be. So it's a very conversational, very practical, very pragmatic, very peer level, and very modern also, very applicable, very relevant to today. It's not limited to just the battlefield. And many have said that, well, there is a constant battle going on within. Even though this took place during the battle outside battle, there's practically never a day, never a time when there isn't a battle within us. And so this knowledge helps us to stabilize that situation, that war within. Literally, that's how the first chapter starts. At many levels, between many parties, you see in the first chapter, the way the context set is there is a conflict. In other words, by war, I mean there's a conflict. There is a conflict of interests. There is a conflict of thoughts. There is a conflict of intentions. There is a conflict of words, vocabulary. There is a conflict of actions that you're seeing at more different levels right in the first chapter itself. Starting from the second chapter, you start to see the disentanglement of that. You see the resolution of all of that. It's a giant hairball. In the first chapter when we arrive there, it's a giant hairball that I don't know where to begin and where to end, what to do. What is all this? How do I get rid of this mess? And sometimes we felt like that. I have felt like that about life. Sometimes we've been brought to that stage. And we're clueless and we literally don't know where to begin and what to do. And we're just so frustrated, so desperate, so lost, so pissed. We're absolutely mad. Or ready to give up, ready to throw up. And sometimes ready to end their own lives. Sadly. All that you see in Arjuna in the first chapter. And mind you, he was the mightiest of the warrior princes, and the entire about 1.8 million altogether soldiers gathered there, added together, about 2/3. So these are great details given in the Mahabharata. About 2/3 was from the Kaurav side, the opposing side, opposite of Arjuna. Arjuna is our hero, right? He's fighting on the right side, the side of goodness, the side of truth, the side of love, the side of selflessness, the side of giving, not grabbing, not hoarding. So their side is weak. They have about 1/3 of that 1.8. And the other side, the takers and the oppressors and the grabbers and the hoarders, they have about 1.2 out of the 1.8 or so million soldiers, if you will. So clearly outnumbered. There's 2 for 1, roughly. And not only the numbers, strength in numbers, yes, but even the luminaries. So the phenomenal warriors, the biggest of the big, the heavy hitters, as we say. They were all on the side of, or most of those were on the side of the wrong, the untruth. And it's interesting if you were to look at today, like what we might see as well, or if you were to see within, majority of the times where our mind goes. Twice, perhaps, two out of 3 times goes where we don't want it to go. It should not go. We end up seeing what we didn't care to, we didn't want to. We end up seeing, hearing, eating something that we regret. That this isn't what I wanted to eat. This isn't how I was planning on spending my time. I wanted to exercise instead. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to meditate, and I find so many excuses to not meditate. And life then feels is filled with twice regrets, right? Then rejoice. 1 in 3 moments might be rejoice, saying, and 2 and 3 could be regretful. And then we get a little bit of rejoice and more of the regret, and we keep pushing forward. So many different ways of looking at it, the war without or the war within. And how do we win is Arjun, the mightiest from fighting from the side of truth, and arguably perhaps the only one really who had any shot at it, any chance of winning the war for this side, is at the last moment. 8 o'clock the war is going to start. This is 7:45 a.m. Everybody has gathered on the battlefield in their own choicest elephants and horses and chariots and their magic tricks and the weapons and all of that. And this guy says, we're in the first chapter, hey, it says to his driver, his charioteer, Krishna, the Lord, would you mind, essentially starts with an order from a devotee to the Lord. Starts with an order given from a disciple to the guru, to the master. And his life starts topsy-turvy, right? It starts the other way around, it starts opposite. We stumble and then we get up, or we screw up and then we learn from mistakes. We do something really bad, say something bad, and then we start to improve. So long as we go to the right place for that improvement, so long as we resolve, so long as we tune into good advice, so long as we want to improve, there is a chance for it. And so Arjun says, hey, would you mind take the chariot to the middle of it? This is all in the first chapter now. Everything that I'm sharing actually shows up in the first chapter. Senayor ubhayor madhye ratham sthapaya me achyuta is the Sanskrit verse that I'm describing. Senayo, Sena is army, right? Senayo is plural, but madhya is middle. So 2 armies, take it to the middle. What? Rath is chariot. Sthapaya, and stay there. Don't just drive past the midpoint. Take me to the midpoint of the 2 armies, so the line dividing the 2, and then stay there. May my chariot, Achyuta, he's saying, is one of the names. Like I said, there are different names of Krishna and Arjuna in it. And so on occasion we'll visit, what does it mean? Why is he randomly calling him by this name or that name? So Achyut has a very deep, loaded meaning. When you're interested, we can decode that. There is some complexities in the Gita, but there is a way to decode the complex and elevate, lift up the principles in it. Also in the names of the Lord and Arjun. So Senayor ubhayor madhye ratham sthapaya me achyuta. I want to see, later on he says, I want to see who all have gathered or is embattled, willing to fight, one to give their life, sacrifice their lives. Who am I going to have to encounter? Who am I going to have to fight, shoo away from this battlefield so that truth will prevail once again, goodness will prevail once again, love, caring, nurture, selflessness will prevail once again. The power of love will prevail over the love of power once again. With his opponent, with Duryodhan, with the Kauravas, with the evil ones, it was all about the love of power. And they're power hungry, and by machinations they had grabbed onto the power and just kept it and kept avoiding giving back to the rightful heir. Right? In the Mahabharata, that's what this is about. Arjun's older brother, Yudhishthira, was the rightful heir of Hastinapur. And they kept on tricking them, playing games with them, and depriving them of regaining the throne that belonged to them. Because they wanted power, and to corrupt to begin with, power corrupted them more, as the adage goes, right? He wanted absolute power, because in his mind was absolute corruption. And someone had to stop him, the system had to take care of it. The system to which we all belong, the cosmic system, made of the cosmic laws, at some point had to take care of it, fix it. And that's what brought everyone to the brink of the war. You can draw parallels within also. Sometimes there's family feuds. Sometimes something happens at work. Sometimes friends, so-called friends, turn out to be really not so. And the other way around as well. So these are all confusing moments, and things are not clear, and we don't know what to do and what to make of it. And in all of those instances, as was in this place on the battlefield, the Gita comes in handy, comes in perfectly there to guide us through the situation. So that's the context of the Gita. A couple of other shlokas that come. So Duryodhana is like sort of beating his chest. Duryodhana is the opponent of Arjun, right? He's the evil prince. Arjun's big brother was also fighting with Arjun. 5 brothers. He's a good prince. So the evil prince, Duryodhana, is beating his chest saying, look what I've got. What chance do they have? Anyecha bhavo shuraha madarte tyakta jivitaha nana shastra praharanaha sarve yuddha visharadaha. This is a verse that I just picked to put in front of you from the first chapter, because we'll hop, scot, and jump across the first chapter to get to that side. He's saying, on the other hand, Duryodhana is saying, look to his people. What is this? Like, what chance do they have? They got Bhim, like he's like a bodybuilder who's there. And what else? Who else is literally Duryodhana is saying? They've got one guy, one strong man from Bhim from their side. He doesn't even care about Arjun. He knows Arjun's prowess, but he always marginalizes, always belittles. He doesn't care. And therefore he is kind of preemptively declaring victory as if before the war began. We saw that in November of 2020. Before election, victory was declared, right? Before the election was over. Yeah, well, of course, we're going to win. What else? Who else? We see that a lot elsewhere also. Sometimes it happens in life, sometimes in families, sometimes at workplace, sometimes at other places. The overconfidence. So he's saying, Anyecha bahavo shura. Anye, so many others. Before that verse, he has named a bunch of warriors, Duryodhana, in the Gita, that I'm skipping a bunch of shlokas. But he's named until then a bunch of mighty warriors from his side, and then a bunch of warriors on the other side, on Arjun's side. He says, yeah, they've got Bhim, and they've got his son, Abhimanyu. They say he's okay, he's an okay kid. He kind of knows sort of how to fight. And a few others he names. He completely walks right past Krishna. Doesn't even acknowledge him as any worth mentioning even. Possibly also because Krishna had made the promise, so taken a vow that I will participate in this battle, but I will not fight, because this is not my battle. Our life's battle is our battle, friends. God will guide us. God helps those who help themselves. He will guide us. He does guide us. He unbeknownst to us, know it or not, like it or not, believe it or not, accept it or not, doesn't matter. Truth doesn't change. We are being guided. There is guidance in our lives. Well, He's not going to fight our fights. He never does. He never will. And He says that emphatically a few times in the Gita also. Later on in the 3rd chapter or 4th chapter, He says, I don't mess with what all this is. I'll guide. I'll show you the way. You're going to have to do the walking. You will have to drive. So this is tough love, but it is like the most useful form of love. Right? So when Arjun and Duryodhana went to ask for help to different kings, this is the entire kingdom of Bharat, meaning India. Every state in India at the time participate in that war, had to take sides. Are you going to fight from Duryodhana's side or Arjun's side? Every king signed up, essentially, that I'm on this side, I'm on that side. That's how, in the end, it ended up being 2/3 were fighting out of fear. Majority of them fighting out of fear, suppressed, submissively from Duryodhana's side, because he'd grown very mighty. And all these mighty warriors were from his side, that he names them. And therefore, some of them said, we don't want to. Some of them secretly sent messages to Arjun's side. we don't want to, but I don't have a choice. And therefore, I'm sorry, you'll see me on the opposing side. I'm fighting from that side. And so they had also gone to Krishna, because he was the prince of Dwarka, which is on the western sort of shore of India, still there today in Gujarat, right? There was an island then. I think it's an island now also. But there is a symbolic place on the western coast in Gujarat also. So, which side are you going to fight from? Krishna said, I'm a lover, not a fighter. He said it before Michael Jackson. Krishna said, I don't fight. I'm not going to fight. I'll show you the way of love. But still, they both wanted to. And so Krishna said, I have two things that I can give. One is my mighty army, invincible sort of kind of army. The only one who could defeat his army was himself. I mean, this is my interpretation of it. But he says that so one of you can have my army, the other can have me. He says to Duryodhana and Arjun, who both approached him. And Arjun says, and there's a lovely story associated with that, how this all unfolds and manifests. I'll skip the story. A lot of you probably know how it plays out beautifully, dramatically. But and there's a big lesson in it also. But I'll skip the story. And Arjun says, no, I want you, Krishna. And Duryodhana is so giddy. He's a stupid idiot, he said, literally. He goes back and says, like, he's so dumb. Arjun says to his, Duryodhana says about Arjun to his own people. He had a chance. Krishna asked him before me, that do you want my army or do you want me? And that dummy asked for him. And he said, no, if I'm forced to pick, then I'll pick you, Krishna, not your army. And therefore, guys, Krishna gave me his army. All his army is going to fight from our side. And so Krishna was from this, and Krishna had said at the time to both of them that I will not fight, I will not raise a weapon. I will not lift a weapon. I'm not going to fight in that war. I'll show up in whichever way you want. So Arjun says, well, you're an expert driver. The way you navigate, the way you maneuver, the way you sort of eloped with Rukmini, his first wife, it's famed and fabled how you trekked and how you found your way out. Can you be my driver? Would you mind? I'll need a very expert charioteer. If it's all on my shoulders to fight this battle, I need a charioteer who will always protect me. I'll figure out ways to escape, even when surrounded by armies. And Krishna says, okay, yeah, I don't have to take up a weapon for it, so I'll be your charioteer. There is a lot of significance in it, right? When we put the Lord, when we put the force in front of us, when we follow it, when we let it take the lead. It, whatever you want to call, God, him, her, Devi, Surya, Shiva, Krishna, Ram, Jesus, Allah, whatever your it is, when we have some trust, your own Atma, your Guru, whatever the it is, and when we're willing to follow its lead, the charioteer is in front of the one sitting in the chariot. The charioteer is then protecting also. If anyone was throwing any arrows at Arjun in the front, the first had to encounter the charioteer. Right? He has the basics of faith in Krishna, and he says, yeah, great. I got my driver, I got my vehicle, I got my driver. This is Indy 500, and I have to win this. He's got his pit crew also there, his 4 brothers, Yudhishthir, Bhim, Nakul, and Sahadev. And the war is about to begin in about 15 minutes, and he says, so Duryodhana was saying, look, I've got Bhishma on my side, I've got Drona on my side, I've got Kripacharya on my side, I've got Karan on my side. This Karan can blow Arjuna out of water any day, any moment. Bhim, this mace that I carry, Duryodhana says, I can crush Bhim with my mace. So Karan is going to take care of Arjun, I'm going to take care of Bhim. Nakul and Sahadev are like pretty boys. Yeah, they're more interested in makeup, he says. Those are pretty boys. My mama, my old uncle will take care of them. Shakuni will take care of them. Yudhishthir is captured. Just think of it as Like, what's he going to do? He just sits on the throne and rules. So he's ready to declare victory. He has declared victory, and right, to some extent, rightly so. So next time we'll pick up from here, because I want to say 15 minutes today for some conversation. Why do I say rightly so to some extent? Because of those who are fighting from his side, or luminaries, who are some of the greatest of the times as well, from Duryodhan's side. So, congratulations to us that we're actually in the first chapter. I had not expected this. That today, my thought was that we will only be talking about how should we do this, what should we do, should we do this or that. But you all quickly sifted through that. We have a structure now, we have a framing, we're going to follow that. We're going to do every other week from 2 to 4. We'll set it from 2 to 4, but whoever can join whenever can join, whoever has to leave whenever can leave. So we'll keep it a little bit of a loosely defined structure that way. We will always start with English meditation, first 10-12 minutes. We'll always set the context. We will always do the grounding of the context, like where are we, so that no one is lost. And then we'll get into some hand-picked verses of the Gita, like I shared with you a couple of those today. And we'll keep making progress through it. Then we'll stop. And then we'll end also, not today, but starting next one, we'll also do a few minutes of dhyan in the end, like summarizing, bringing out the theme together. And then we'll keep the last 15-20 minutes for us to share with each other 2 questions, same question every time. What did you pick up from today's session, your own personal takeaway, and how can you use it for your own, in your own personal lives? What good is it? What use is it? Why waste time otherwise? That it is 3:50 and I'm going to stop, and I will unmute folks, and you'll start sharing back your excitement, your engagement, your thoughts, any feedback, any suggestions, any concerns. All is fair in love and war, and Gita is the perfect setting for love and war. There's a war happening. And Gita is nothing but the song of love. And so all is fair. Jai Shri Krishna.